Building wealth isn't just about personal gain, it's about empowering yourself and your community. This is Wealthy AF. Today's guest is Matt Morstad. And Matt made a career out of solving complex and tricky problems. Frustrated with the broad trend of complacency and growing apathy amongst corporate leaders, he chose to exit the corporate world, a secured seven-figure position, to embark on a unique journey, inspiring and educating people through his social media platform, GSD Nation. The Programming Lions podcast, started by his father with his children, is more than just a platform for dialogue. It's promoting growth, wellness, and productive habits. Matt, sir, thank you for coming on the show. It's my pleasure and honor to have you here, brother.
Amazing. Well, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to get on and explore some topics together. And you summed it up pretty well. I left the corporate world late last year, 25 years experience in the corporate world, and I largely did that because I was concerned about the future of our youth, and I wanted to take this precious time where I've got kids 10 and 12 and spend time with them and empower them to be strong, confident adults to deal with this generation that's coming and everything that's going to hit them, and make them stronger, more resilient, more productive. And so it's been quite a journey, but I'm enjoying it, and being able to share a little bit more about how we think and what we're doing is it's a great opportunity. So I appreciate being on.
Love it. Thank you for coming on, brother. So today's topic we're going to talk about is going to be financial literacy for the youth. And what are the biggest financial challenges facing young adults today, Matt?
Well, there's good news, there's some hard truths, and there's some opportunities in this whole space for the next generation. But I would say in terms of the biggest things challenging the next generation, I think of that in terms of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, is that the systems and the people in power are essentially stealing their future through policies and practices that are happening today. And it's really unfortunate because for the first time ever, a kid born today is less likely to have the same lifestyle that his parents and grandparents had. It's costing people more as a percentage of their take-home income or average income to buy a home, a car, other goods and materials in their lives. And so it's harder than ever to be successful in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of opportunity in there. So I would say that's sort of the biggest challenge, is that the cards are getting stacked against the youth. We're spending their future on, credit card that they haven't approved yet through their voting rights, etc. And they've got a lot to overcome. And so it's really important that we inform them about what is happening, how the systems work, and then what they can do to hack, work around, and optimize their own situation in this wild world.
I interviewed a senator, Pennsylvania state senator, here a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And he voted, there was a bill that was passed that was brought to be voted on. And the bill was on ensuring that there was financial literacy in the state of Pennsylvania taught as a requirement. It was a requirement. It was a course that needed to be taught in high school, and it was made a requirement for a student to graduate high school in the state of Pennsylvania. And this particular state senator, Marty, shout out to you if you're listening to this. I commended him on the podcast. Voted yes for this bill, and I totally in agreement with that. And the challenge was, as he expressed when I was talking to him, was that the people of his party, which he's a Democrat, gave him slack for this, and I just didn't understand why. Here we're talking about politician. You mentioned the government spending these kids' credit cards, right, without their even knowing. So.
Right.
What is the answer?
Well, there's no silver bullet for this. Obviously, it's a very complex challenge, but there's a few things that I would say. The first is having financial literacy in schools. That sounds good. It seems like a good bill to vote for on the surface. Now, when you peel back into the potentially 1,000-page bill and what's in there and what was voted for and what was not, I suppose that's where some of the criticism comes from, because I sympathize with politicians today that have to vote on a bill that is not a single topic. It's usually a multitude of topics squished together in a effort to extort, this for that, so that they can get these things through their system. But yes, on the surface, teaching financial literacy in schools sounds good. The reality is the school systems are pretty broken. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of indoctrination into how kids are taught. And so that might be good, but I don't think it's enough. The school systems, government programs, higher education, it's largely built and operated to produce factory workers or batteries in the system because they need these types of batteries to keep the economy going in traditional form and format. So yes, they can get some financial literacy in school, but I think the best or the solution really is on parents. Like, parents have to own the process and the outcome with their kids. And what that means is you need to take an active and present role with your kids to teach them about financial literacy every single day. And this isn't as hard as it might sound. There's all kinds of great educational assets out there, whether it's YouTube or different apps that can talk about this. But I would say for me personally, what's worked the best is taking real world examples every single day that I can work through with my kids. It could be as easy as like when we go out to dinner, like here's what dinner cost. Here's how the tip works. And then my kids are like, we spent that much on dinner? And I'm like, yeah, you know what else we could have done with that money? And so then you teach them about opportunity cost. And if we would have put that money into something else that like made us money versus spending the money. I like to go over life decisions in our home. For example, like we had a property that we were going to build a new house on, get a little bit bigger space for the family and everything. And we talked about this together and the trade-offs and what it would mean and how much time it would take and the opportunity cost of investing that money into passive cash generating income streams versus spending the money and then having higher taxes on what I spent, higher home insurance spend, and higher property taxes. So through that, my kids learn real world financial literacy. And then, of course, I left the corporate world late last year to start GSD Nation, and we've got this podcast programming alliance that my kids are on. And so that's a great opportunity because now we've started a business. They're seeing how we're growing. They're seeing what types of content is clicking, what's not. So they're learning how to analyze. They're seeing the work that has to get put in to provide outcomes. And we have guests on. We talk about a variety of topics. And so they're learning directly from people. And so to sum it up, I would say the solution is active, engaged, and very present parents in the home. And if you can do that and really like own that with your kids, you're going to set them up for success.
What do you say to the parents that don't know, right? Because I know you focus on helping the youth, which is a great thing because that's future. If you want to change the world, change the youth, right? And the Democrats have got that figured out really well. They've known how to get the youth to buy into their ideas. How do we then take the parents that don't know any better, right, that don't have financial literacy, that are struggling? How can they teach something they don't know? Where do they start?
That's a great question. I would start by there's so many great content creators, you know, the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing. So you can follow people that will help give you the recipe or the blueprint. And I don't have all the answers for sure, but you follow us and you'll get tidbits, morsels, every podcast you listen to, every conversation, maybe every post isn't resonating, but once in a while you're going to see things like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to make sure that I incorporate that routine or that habit into my life or that way of thinking, right? And I'm sure today we'll cover some things that make people think. And sometimes they might think, well, I don't agree with that, or I agree with that. I really want to incorporate that. So I would encourage people to seek out resources through YouTube, through podcasts, and put that into your routine. Listen to a financial podcast on a regular basis. Program it in, put it in your car, on your drive to work or during your workout or whatever it is. Replace it with listening to hip hop or whatever your music genre is, and learn while you're doing. So that's an easy sort of swap of music or podcasts, and then now you're learning. So I think if you engage with communities that you like, you'll end up absorbing some of that so you can incorporate it into your own life. Because you're right. Like if you don't have that financial literacy, it's hard to just flip the switch and say like, oh, I'm going to teach my kid about all of this. But there are resources out there that you can get to. And so there's podcasts like yours, there's podcasts like mine that people can check out and follow. There's a number of others, and there's big names out there that I would recommend, like Scott Galloway is an interesting guy who's been very popular. He talks about the challenges that are facing the youth in this generation. So, check out some of the work that he's done. Grant Cardone is a big real estate mogul investor, but he's creating avenues for kids, and he explains things in layman's term for average people. He's also providing wealth building income streams for the average person in America. So I would just say gravitate towards some of those things. Pick up what you can, learn, engage, put yourself out there, get a little uncomfortable, and you'll start building that muscle.
How can young people navigate the often confusing world of financial jargon and product?
Well, it is a busy world. I think this goes back to parents and access to resources. So I think kids are naturally curious, and if we encourage their curiosity for topics or jargon, then hey, go look that up. Check it out, for example. And I can just say, as an example, a few things that I do with my kids. My kids will say, Dad, what is the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve rate, Fed funds rate? What does that even mean? Okay.
Those are good questions. Those are powerful questions from a 10 and 12-year-old kid, right?
Right. Well, they've heard me. It is a big question for a 10 and 12-year-old. And I think they reached that question because I would talk about how the Federal Reserve is acting and their policies and how that impacts inflation, businesses, lending practices, the ability to take on debt. And so my kids want to learn more about it, and I'll talk to them about it. And let's just say I have maybe a higher level of financial literacy than maybe the average parent, maybe not, I don't know. But what I will do with them is I'll say, okay, let's pull up YouTube and we'll look at how does the Federal Reserve work? Or maybe another topic would be the history of the Federal Reserve. And this is what I mean by there's so much knowledge and information out there that's really good. And when you go and search for something like that, you'll invariably find even cartoon-ish types of content that you can watch together as a family. And so I can say in my family, what works for us is we watch fun stuff. We watch movies. Last night we watched Superman versus Batman for a bit. But we will spend also an equal amount of time watching educational things. So we have been watching the World War II overview on Netflix, but we will also pull up YouTube and we'll watch something like the history of the Federal Reserve. And so then watching that, my kids will learn, wow, the Federal Reserve was started in 1913 and it was started by a bunch of super rich dudes. Why would they do that? And then they learn, well, why did they do that? Because they made a lot of money making interest on everybody's money. And then we also realized while we were doing that federal income tax was not a thing until 1913. And so this big expansion of government with the Federal Reserve and federal income tax and further expansion of government entitlement programs and so forth, that was a big phase in government expansion. And so then my kids started with learning about the Federal Reserve, and then they learned more about taxes, tax policies, and government expansion, other programs. And then it naturally drifted them into other things that they were interested in, right? And so getting back to the question is I would just encourage using the resources out there when they're curious or they ask a question about a term or a piece of jargon. Try to explain it to them in your layman terms, but maybe encourage them. Let's look it up. Let's learn this together. And there are immense resources out there. The place I would start is YouTube. YouTube, they got so many good things out there that you can watch together as a family.
Saving versus investing. What's the difference, and which is more important for young people?
Investing, 100%. Saving, I think saving is a myth. Now, I'll explain. So my definition of wealth is, and you'll enjoy this because it opens up the universe of who can be wealthy. Okay. My definition of wealth is when you have a passive income stream that is greater than your burn rate. And what I mean by that is your passive income or cash flow from assets that are not your daily working income job is larger than what you spend or your burn rate. So your average expenses. And I say your corporate job or your day job doesn't equate into that, because that is not an asset-backed, cash-flowing type of, it's not an investment, it's just something you're doing to earn money. And so what's important, in my opinion, if you want to be wealthy, is that you start developing passive income streams that can overtake your burn rate. And when that passive income stream is higher than your burn rate, you are wealthy. And so you can imagine somebody that has a $50,000 passive income stream and a burn rate or an expense rate of $40,000 a year, you're wealthy, because you're creating $10,000 of wealth every year by doing nothing. And then you can reinvest that delta back into the wealth generating things, or you can increase your burn rate or spend rate and have a higher lifestyle, or you can balance those things. So maybe you do 50-50 and you build your lifestyle over time. But what's really important for kids to understand is that saving, when I think of saving, I think you take money down to the bank, you give it to the bank, then they lend it to somebody else. But ultimately they pay you a small percentage on your money. And a lot of times they'll even charge you fees to keep your money at their bank that they lend out for higher rates, which is wild. And depending on how much money you put in, you may not even have access to it or all of it when you want to get it. So at a bank, you can save, but you're going to get 0.5% to 1.5%, depending on how much money you invest and what type of program you're in. That means that you are losing money on your money, because the dollar is getting devalued every single day. And so with an inflation rate of 3 to 8% that has been over the last several years, or historically it's been in that 3 to 5% range, even though the Fed targets 2%. So it's baked into the system that the government wants inflation. So what that means is every year your dollar is less and less and less valuable. So if you're only making 1% on your savings, your cash that's at the bank virtually, you're actually losing money, because you're making 1%, but you're losing 3 to 8% in inflation. So you're actually losing money on your money. So that's what I think of as traditional savings models. Investing is investing in assets. And so assets could be a variety of things. And I know you're into real estate. And so I think real estate is perhaps one of the best assets that appreciates over time. It's just stable. You can build wealth and income off of real estate. So real estate's a great one. There's of course stocks, and you're investing in companies. And I would advise, companies that provide dividends, etc. There's other assets like gold, crypto, and so forth. But you have a hard asset backed by the money that you invested into it. And so I see those as investments, and those are going to rise typically at a commensurate rate with inflation and or outpace inflation. So those are investments that will pay you back. And so the I guess, back to sort of the origination of the question is, I think you should encourage kids not to save, but rather to invest. And then as they get more income, whether it's from birthdays, Christmas, or maybe a first job, encourage them to take as much as they can or they're comfortable with and put it into investments. And the earlier they can start doing that in their lives, the earlier they'll see this model of passive income and cash flow generation and how that grows over time with investments versus savings.
I love that. That's a great piece of advice. Should student loans? No, I don't want to go there. Is college always the best financial decision?
Absolutely not. It's becoming a worse financial decision every single day. Unfortunately, it's sad. The traditional model of go to school, get good grades, apply to college, go to college, get the degree, get out into the corporate world, work hard, climb the ladder, retire. That model is, I don't want to say it's over, but it's largely been deteriorated or destroyed. So the next generation, they can do that, but they will become part of the hive. They'll just become part of the hive. They will be a battery in the system working for the overlords of their corporation. And so what I encourage people to really do is think about, what are you passionate about? What are you good at? And how can you build an entrepreneurial spirit around what you want or what you're good at? And that may or may not include college. I think college can be great for some people, and it depends on what you want to do. Like, I am an engineer by education. I probably could not have done what I did without an engineering degree or education. Okay. If you are a doctor or a lawyer, or perhaps maybe an accountant, yes, like a college degree can help you on that path. But if you want to own and operate a business, I don't know that college is the best path. We talked about opportunity cost earlier, and so you have to really weigh, like, where can I learn the most, get the most knowledge, and get the most experience, hands-on experience. So if I take the money that I would have otherwise spent on college and I build a network, I start building a business, maybe it fails, maybe it succeeds, maybe we iterate on that, but all that money that I would have otherwise spent in college, I can spend on this experience that is hands-on, directly attributed to what I want to do. That, for a lot of people, I think is a better investment, and it gets you, faster path to wealth and financial freedom and all of that. Yeah, it's, there are people that say college is a scam. I'm not quite there. I think that college is unfortunately drifting in a path of like less productive outcomes. I think there's, what is the statistics? Only like 50% of people use their college education. So they go through it, they take on a lot of debt. College is more expensive than ever. That's a whole other scam. I mean, when college has their debt federally guaranteed, well, no surprise that they increase their rates year after year after year. And so college becomes really unaffordable for most, and it puts people into a real like backlog of debt right out of school, and it's a difficult climb to get out of.
I think it gives young people a disadvantage, like you mentioned. If you're a doctor, lawyer, engineer, and by the way, so my business partner is a doctor, very successful doctor, entrepreneur, and a lot of those careers, even those careers, specialized careers, are being threatened right now by AI. Right? There's some corporate, big corporate companies that are downsizing their legal team because they have artificial intelligence that's doing the job of an attorney better than an attorney can. So it puts young people at a disadvantage when they go to college, especially just think about this, Matt, right? You're a young person, 17, 18 years old, and we're brainwashed. Hey, you got to go to college. Especially in the Latino. I'm Latino, from Latino background. And man, we are told from the time we are like in our mother's womb, you got to go to school. You got to go to school, because when we come here, I'm first generation born. We are told, our parents come here, first generation born American. Our parents come here and they're working the factory jobs. They're working the cleaning jobs. They're working the construction jobs, and they come home tired and they're beat up, and they're like, you don't want to do this. You don't want to be like me. So you go get an education so that you can go get an office job or a better job, or you get paid better and you're the boss. And the only way you're going to do that is through an education. Yep. But unfortunately, our parents don't have the education themselves to know, or the mindset to know how to properly train us or tell us that there is a better way. Maybe you could be the cleaning person, but learn how to create a business around the cleaning company.
Yes.
Maybe you could be the construction person, learn this trade, but then learn how to create a team so that you can be the owner and go do, right? And do that instead. So it's just, a lot of it is just a brainwash, in my opinion, by society, that we need to go and we need to do this because that's what we're being told to do. Now, you think about it, you're 17, 18-year-old kid, and you're going to college. You don't even know who you are yourself. You remember when you were 17, 18 years old, you're trying to figure out life. You're trying to figure out, you don't know who you are. You have no clue really yet who you are, what you stand for, and things like that. So when that happens, you go into college, and now, not knowing who you are yourself, graduate from there with $200,000 in debt. Now, what a disservice have we done to that young person? I mean, what a setback to start life. What a way to set you back financially to start life. A decision you made when you were 17 years old. Now, we don't let our kids at 17 drink. How are we going to let our kids go and make the decision to go into debt for the rest of their life that cannot be put in bankruptcy? for the rest of their, how are we doing that to our society? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, Matt? What's the deal with that?
Well, I'll put on my tinfoil hat for a minute, but I 100% agree with you. I think this is one of the biggest lies that's being told to the public and is being indoctrinated into people and families, and it's really unfortunate. Like it's sad because exactly what you described is what's happening is kids don't really know what they want to do, and they're encouraged to go and just study, take on debt, and you'll be saddled with it for the rest of your life. And so why I say tinfoil hat is I believe there's a direct intention from the government to do this. Getting people into the system makes them more passive, makes them more controllable, also makes sure that they're contributing into the system the way that they want. And when you're contributing into the system and you're part of the system, now you are reliant on the system. Your livelihood is dependent on the system. And therefore, you're very, compliant to the system. You'll do what you are told. And when you have financial freedom, owning your own business or whatever it might be, and you don't have a lot of debt, when you have financial freedom, well, then you're free. You can say what you want. You can do what you want. You can unite with others that want to stand up against something, right? And so, yes, I believe there has been for decades, and it's continuing, a direct effort to have more of a power and control over the system because, those leaders, they know best, right? They know best what people need. And ultimately, this is going to manifest itself in longer term trends that are hurting young people. As of today, it's really sad. Like you look at kids, they're struggling more than ever to have the same lifestyle as their parents. They're struggling with depression, suicide, self-harm. It's costing them multiples of what they make versus their parents to buy the same things. They're struggling with obesity. They're not having as much sex. They're not in relationships. They're not having kids. They're not procreating. Like, this next generation is really damaged because of the policies that we've put in place. And I think your premise is exactly right, that they're encouraged to do this. And people coming into the country that don't maybe know better, they're like, oh, well, this is the American dream. American dream. Why pick a fence? Got to sell my soul to buy a home so that I can have the place and pay taxes into the system on my home and to the insurance companies for to manage my home and teach my kids to go to school and get through the system and learn how the system works and how to be part of the system. And so, yeah, I think it's hurting America, unfortunately. And there are alternative paths to that. And you described one of them, which is find something. It could be a trade. Maybe your parents are in a cleaning business. Well, figure out how to have your own cleaning business. Yeah, how to be the cleaning business. And when you don't have that entrepreneurial education or know-how or whatever, okay, well, I think the first thing you can do is acknowledge that. But there are resources out there that can help you turn your trade or your skill or your work ethic into a business. And so one example, like I participate in Grant Cardone's 10X community. And so the 10X community has something called Cardone Ventures. They'll take and work with small businesses that have expertise in a trade or an industry or whatever, and they'll provide you blueprints and playbooks for how to take that business, build processes and systems around it, and develop that and grow the business. And they'll help you along the way. So, and I'm not here, let's say, plugging that, but what I would say is there are businesses out there, if you search for it, like how to make my business successful, how to scale, a small business. You can find resources out there that can help you do that if you don't know how to do that or know what you're doing.
So I got two final questions for you, my friend. Thank you for that. That's in total agreement with you that there's definitely resources out there. I mean, we live in the information age, right? Like the fact that you just said in this podcast something that probably someone's listening to on their phone, something that they carry around while they're walking, driving, or exercising, or cooking, or cleaning, or whatever they're doing, and there's the answer, right? And we live in the information age. sometimes it's just not even knowing what to ask. I think we have too much information, and therefore we are inundated with too much information. It's not curated. The information we're looking for is not curated, and we don't even know what to ask. You ever been on Google and you're like, okay, I want to get this, but I don't even know how to ask this thing? Or I know I've been there. I don't know how to ask, and you're trying to ask it, and you don't know how to. You're not getting the right answer. It's not getting you. And you're like, wait, that's not what I'm asking. Like how? What? So a lot of times it's just knowing what to ask, or just listening to the right person, is who you're spending time with and who you're listening to. I'm a big advocate of that. You being part of the 10X community, the Grant Cardone community is a great community. And this, again, who you're spending time with matters. My final question, my two final questions are, number one is, what's the one elite strategy that you can share that will help young people become more financially literate? So the Gen Zs, the millennials are having kids now, but the millennials, the young Z and Gen Z community, and the younger ones, because I see a lot of on social media, I see a lot of the Gen Z community, the younger guys and gals, kind of complaining, and I know they have it tough. And you know what? We had it tough too, right?
Yep.
Like, I had it tough too when I bought my first house at 21, yes, 21 going on 22. First house at 21 was making $40,000, $45,000 a year at the time, and my mortgage was $2,153 a month. You do the math with a pregnant wife and already two kids, right? We started really young, and yeah, that was hard, man. Like, you do the math. You do the math on that, Matt. That was hard, right? And one breadwinner on sales and a commission job, right? That was hard. But I hear a lot of the young people kind of complain and they bitch and moan about the boomers have all the money and all of this and all that. Well, the boomers also had it hard too. They were also making $20 a week or whatever they were making back when they bought when houses were 50, 60,000. So it's all kind of relevant. And I know that things are a little bit bigger now. However, I think we, as human beings, we have to figure out a way. I think young people, we have to figure out a way for you to be listening to guys like Matt. Like, he gave some really, really good stuff here. Figure out how to become financially free. You guys know I'm a big advocate of that. You're listening to me. Your assets to create more, produce more than your expenses. You're efficiently, Matt, his definition, wealthy. I call that financial freedom. That's it, being free, right? And you got to figure that out. And I think it's all of our responsibility. But what's the one thing that you would tell young people? And then I kind of went a little rant there about.
It's a good rant. I like it. Yeah.
But what I'm seeing on the social there. But what's the one elite strategy you will share with young people, Matt, that will help them become more financially literate?
Well, I think I said my elite strategy is you have to own your outcomes. Don't be a victim to the system, process, the cards that are stacked against you. The deck is absolutely stacked against Gen Z, Gen Alpha right now. I'm really worried about it. I got two kids that are in this generation. And when you have kids, I think you're automatically invested in the next generation because you care about the outcomes. Being a victim to it is not going to help you get out of it. Some of these things will ultimately unwind themselves. They will have to, because it's not sustainable. So for young people, what I would recommend is think about what you can do, what you can overcome, how you can own the outcomes. What hacks can you put into your life to transfer some of that boomer wealth into your pocket? What services, businesses can you create to create that transfer mechanism into your pocket? And it's going to take sacrifice and it's going to take hard work. But something else I would say is good news for these generations is I don't think, ever been easier to stand out. People have become so soft. Parents are soft. Kids are soft. The systems indoctrinate softness into society. So if you have just an ounce of savage in you, an extraordinary work ethic, you can overcome, overtake, and rise above your peers, I think, easier than ever. So what I would encourage people to do is own your outcomes, find a path, develop your hacks, whatever that might be, and then build wealth. I talked about building wealth in terms of taking income that you make and immediately, as young as you can, start putting that into passive income streams. And that could be real estate, stocks, whatever, things that pay you back. And then as you get wealthier and you have those things paying you back in cash flow, then start increasing the ratio, right, of your burn rate to maybe you want to spend more, you want to increase your lifestyle. So fine, but you have to make some sacrifices early on. And the more and the longer you sacrifice in terms of keeping your expenses down, the more wealth you can build. But if you want to build a better lifestyle, okay, but then your wealth is going to grow at a slower pace. And so the more that you can put back into the wealth generator over time, the more sacrifices you can make early in your life, you'll set yourself up for the long term. And I would encourage people to think about passive income streams in terms of investments, real estate, and hard assets that are backed, or maybe lending mechanisms, but they're backed by hard assets. Things like that are going to provide longer term stability and inflation protected types of wealth generation. And I would also encourage kids to think about diversifying that. You can get really hurt if you go all in on one thing or another. So I would, my rough math for me personally is I take 50% of my investments and I put them into very stable things. So real estate protected by inflation, gold, crypto, good companies that have longevity. And then you can take another 25% and put them into maybe a little bit higher to mid-risk types of investments. And then you can take 10 to 25% and put it into speculative things. So things that have the opportunity of maybe, going up exponentially or crashing completely. And some of those will take off, some of them will crash. And then over time, you just have to recalibrate that investment diversification portfolio. Because if you have a couple things that take off, for example, and, I'm going to just keep NVIDIA forever because it's just going to keep going up 1,000% a year. Mm-hmm. Well, now when it crashes, you've dramatically challenged your wealth pie. So what you got to do is reallocate your wealth pie on a regular basis. So think about doing that every quarter or at least half a year. At any rate, I went on a bit, but I think the main point is own your outcomes. Don't be a victim.
I love that. That's a real powerful message that needs to be sent. That needs to be spoken on a loudspeaker, loud and clear for all young people to hear, and really own your outcome. Don't be a victim. I love that. I'm going to share a quick story with you, man. I was about that as you were sharing that. I was having, and I won't mention any names. It was in my backyard. I was having barbecue in my house, and we were having some hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff in my backyard. And this person tells me, he's in my home, and we were talking about my daughter. My daughter at the time was just three years old. She was 3 years ago. Sorry, this was 3 years ago. She was not 3 years. 3 years ago. My daughter at the time had just, around that time, had just become a licensed real estate person.
Okay.
And this person that was talking and I were talking, he made a really sly comment. He made a comment to me about, my house and how my kids were, my daughter is out here and selling real estate. And of course, I'm a real estate guy, right? So I buy, fix, flip houses. I own apartment buildings. I syndicate. I do a bunch of stuff in the real estate space. And I remember saying, well, isn't that the point? Yeah. Isn't that the point? This is what do you think I sacrificed all this for? Isn't that the point for me to have this nice house to provide better for my, isn't that the point for me to teach my kids how to create wealth? Isn't that the whole point? But the point, the connotation of the conversation was the victim mindset.
Yeah.
Like my daughter doesn't, his children don't have the opportunity my children do for whatever his story he's telling himself in his head. And it's just stop playing the victim, because if that person had made a different decision to want to, because it starts with a decision, Matt. It starts with decision.
Yeah.
That person, I made a decision when my wife and I made a decision. We were 22 years old. We were like, we're going to buy our first house and it's going to be hard. And we expected, and we made a decision. She was going to stay home and she was going to raise the kids. And I was going to go out there and hustle and work and do whatever it takes. That was important to us in our value system. We were going to raise our kids in church, and we were going to go to church, and that was our value system. That was important to us. We made a decision. And if you make a decision, if you're listening out there, you make a decision, don't play the victim. Decide not to be the victim. Decide to take control. Decide to sacrifice a little bit today for a better tomorrow. To me, That's the difference between wealthy people and poor people. That's the mindset right there. The ability to say no to something for right now because you're looking into the future. I'm going to sacrifice right now so that I can create more cash flow in the future. And the next year I'm better. And the year after that, I'm better than that. And the year after that, I'm better than that.
Yeah, the better question that individual could have asked you is, how did you do this?
Yes,
what
that's a better question.
You give me? Instead of being jealous, greedy, or whatever, that's the way you build a more productive mindset around what you can do, what tips you can take. And so it is an interesting dynamic in society today where we almost villainize success, right? And we celebrate need. Oh, yeah. So it's really counterintuitive to me. But that's a great example you shared.
Yeah, it really is. Thank you, my friend. Really appreciate that. Matt, if people wanted to get a hold of you, brother, this was a great interview, great conversation. Thank you for coming on. It was my pleasure to have you here. If people wanted to connect with you, Matt, I'm going to highly encourage you guys to go check out his podcast. If people wanted to listen to your podcast, check out your content, how do they find you, Matt? Where do they learn from you? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, well, thank you. This has been a really fun conversation. I enjoyed it, and I hope we touched some people today or gave them some tips and tricks to improve their lives. That's really what we're here to do. And so to get in touch with me or follow our team and channel, you can look up GSD Nation on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok. We're on all those major social media channels. Our podcast is called Programming Lions. We are on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, and then we have a video podcast that goes on YouTube. So I would encourage you to check out our channel, follow us, engage with the community, ask questions. I'm always involved in the comments, and we're trying to build a community of producers and doers and change the mindset so we can change the tone for the next generation. And it starts me and my kids, but I want to bring as many people on this ride as we can.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for coming on. Really, really appreciate you coming on here.
All right. Thanks for having me. This was great.